The door swung open before dinner could start. Maya's feast, her rosemary chicken, her heirloom table setting, was ready. Yet what walked through that door threatened not her food, but her place in the family. Sarah arrived late, with a smile so tight she might have been stepping onto a stage, one scripted with subtle barbs. Maya held her plate like a peace offering, but by the time the chicken cooled, the comments had already cut deeper than any carving knife. Tonight she wasn't just feeding people, she was defending her legacy, and what it took to stay seen in her own home. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. The day of the family feast arrives, and Maya has high hopes for a perfect evening, but the tension between her and Sarah threatens to ruin everything. The scent of rosemary and lemon-drenched chicken filled the kitchen, warm and heavy, clinging to the ceiling like an old hymn. Maya stood over the oven, sleeves rolled, brow damp with the comfortable sweat of control. She stirred with precision, not just to mix, but to prove something about mastery, about tradition. This was her territory, her season, her Mom, you realize this could feed every human in the tri-state area, right? Daniel's voice floated in from behind her, bright and teasing. She smirked, eyes still on the simmering pot. That's the point, isn't it? Leftovers mean you did it right. He leaned in, kissed her cheek, and grabbed a spoonful of mashed potatoes. These could end wars. Maya laughed, but there was a tension buried in the corner of her smile. It lingered like a stubborn clove of garlic she couldn't quite chop away. The kitchen was loud with simmering and music, but her mind kept pacing toward the silence outside it. Sarah wasn't here yet. Again, she stepped into the dining room, smoothing a corner of the linen runner as if it mattered. Every candle was lit. Silverware gleamed like applause waiting to happen. The turkey rested proudly at center. She had ironed the napkins, polished the wine glasses, even arranged tiny rosemary sprigs on each plate. Perfection was a moving target, but tonight it stood still long enough for her to aim. Except Sarah was late. She's probably just stuck in traffic, Daniel offered gently, as if reading her stance more than her thoughts. You know, holiday mess. Maya didn't look up from the seating cards she was now adjusting for the fourth time. It's not the traffic. Daniel tilted his head. She's just been under a lot of pressure. Work, the kids, trying to juggle it all. Don't take it personally. But Maya did. Not because Sarah was late, but because Sarah always arrived with something sharp hidden beneath her smile. Ever since Daniel married her, Maya had felt like a guest in her own family. Her kitchen, her legacy. She returned to the stove, ladling gravy into the heirloom boat she only brought out for real occasions. Her hand shook just slightly. The clock ticked too loudly in the silence that followed. Daniel had stepped away to check his phone, probably coordinating with Sarah. Maya stared out the window, past the frost-glazed glass, into the street where the trees stood bare and quiet. No headlights, no crunch of gravel, just more waiting. She could almost hear her mother's voice. Timing isn't just about the turkey, it's about respect. The doorbell rang. Maya inhaled through her nose, let the steam of the feast fill her lungs. She brushed her hands on her apron and walked to the foyer. Sarah stood on the porch, perfectly coiffed, one hand on her hip, the other holding a bottle of wine like a prop. Her lips curled into a smile too tight to be kind. Well, she said, scanning Maya from apron to hairline. Smells like cholesterol and nostalgia. Behind her, Daniel gave Maya a wide-eyed glance, half apology, half warning. Maya didn't move. The warmth from the kitchen had vanished. She stepped aside without a word, letting Sarah pass like a cold front through a doorway. The mood in the room shifts as Maya realizes this evening won't go as planned. The meal begins, and already, Sarah is making remarks that are cutting through Maya's nerves like a knife. The clink of cutlery echoed beneath the hum of awkward pleasantries. The dining table looked like a spread from a lifestyle magazine, crystal glasses catching the candlelight, golden rolls steaming gently in the basket, and her butternut squash soup ladled into porcelain bowls rimmed in faded blue. Maya stood for a second before sitting, hands resting on the back of her chair like she needed to brace for impact. "Wow," Sarah said, sliding into her seat across from Maya. "You really went full country kitchen this year." Lena, Maya's cousin, smiled warmly and adjusted her scarf. "I think it's all lovely. The squash soup smells divine." Maya gave a tight smile, nodding in appreciation. Her heart was already racing, half from nerves, half from restraint. She had told herself she wouldn't let Sarah get to her tonight, that she'd rise above. Sarah dipped her spoon into the soup with a dramatic swirl, then lifted it like she was assessing oil on a dipstick. "It's very rustic," she said, "like something you'd make after a Pinterest spiral and a panic attack." The silence after her comment wasn't total, but it was sharp. Forks paused. Daniel cleared his throat. Maya gave a soft chuckle, the kind that came from muscle memory, not amusement. "It's just squash and spice," she said gently. "Same as every year." Sarah shrugged. "I guess it's grown on people." Lena leaned in. "I love it. Reminds me of our grandmothers, actually." Maya nodded, grateful, but the warmth didn't hold. Sarah was already reaching for a roll, turning it over like it was suspect. "Are these— oh, you made these too?" she asked, eyes wide with manufactured surprise. "Yes," Maya said, voice calm but clipped. "They've got a texture, but that's charming, right?" There was no laugh this time, just the sound of Daniel sipping water like it could save him. Maya's chest grew tight. She stared at the centerpiece, orange dahlias and dried wheat she had arranged herself. Anything to avoid looking at the pity in Lena's eyes, or the blank smile on Daniel's face, or Sarah's mouth, still twitching like she wasn't done. The main course was brought out with a practiced rhythm. Maya had worked for days on it, her signature roast chicken, surrounded by root vegetables, parsley tucked neatly beneath the skin. It gleamed like gratitude. And then Sarah opened her mouth again. "Oh, chicken." She let the word fall like a dare. "Not turkey? Not even ham?" Maya kept her hands folded in her lap, knuckles pressing bone to bone. "It's what the family loves." Sarah tilted her head. "It's nothing special though, just baked poultry." Lena dropped her fork. Daniel stared hard at his plate. Maya felt the humiliation hit like a slap, quiet, but scalding. Not because of what Sarah said, but because no one else did. No one pushed back. No one stopped. She looked at the roast, what she had poured herself into, and saw it not through her own eyes but Sarah's as something too homemade, something provincial, something all the evenings she'd spent over the years, gently guiding Sarah's clumsy hands through recipes, patiently teaching her how to read spices by scent, how to tell when dough felt right. Every small moment of generosity, of building family through flour and fire, felt like it had been scraped off the plate. Sarah bit into the chicken, then set her fork down like it had disappointed her. And Maya finally felt the click. Something in her spine straight. In the room where her food had always spoken for her, where kindness had been plated and passed like currency, Sarah had drawn a line. Maya placed her napkin slowly on the table, and looked directly at Sarah. No smile, no mask. The next course wouldn't be food, it would be truth. Sarah's insults escalate, and Maya is finally pushed to her breaking point. For a moment, no one moved. Maya's napkin sat folded beside her plate, a white flag before a war no one wanted to name. She kept her gaze on Sarah, steady, unblinking. The silence swelled, and the only sound was the low whir of the ceiling fan cutting through the room like a blade too dull to matter. Sarah lifted her wine glass with exaggerated grace. "You know what this reminds me of?" she said, gesturing toward her plate like it offended her. "That same chicken from our first Christmas here. The one you said had a secret herb blend." She laughed, sharp and glinting. "Guess the secret was that it never changed." Daniel coughed quietly, as if trying to signal, but Sarah was in performance mode now, cruel, performative, practiced. "I mean, we get it," she went on. "It's comforting. It's classic. But maybe next year, we try something that doesn't taste like it came from another." A fork clattered to a plate somewhere down the table. Lena tried a laugh, thin and brittle, a match that wouldn't catch. "Oh, Sarah, that's not fair. Maya's food is beautiful." Sarah shrugged. "Beautiful doesn't mean bold, just means it's been arranged." The room froze in amber. Eyes flicked from one face to the next. No one dared to chew. Maya exhaled slowly, keeping her voice low. "Is there a reason, Sarah?" Sarah blinked. "A reason for what?" "For this." Maya motioned gently with her hand, encompassing the table, the tension, the weight between them, the sarcasm, the need to correct everything. Sarah leaned back, arms folding like armor. "I'm just being honest." "No," Maya said. Her voice didn't rise, but it no longer bent. "You're being cruel, and I want to know why." A beat, too. Sarah's mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at Daniel, who looked down at his plate like he wished it could swallow him. Finally Sarah laughed, but it was hollow. "You really don't get it, do you?" Maya tilted her head. "Then explain it." Sarah's expression hardened. "You never let anyone shine. Not in this house. Not in this family. Everything has to orbit around you. Your food, your stories, your traditions. There's never room for anyone else." The words hit like a whip. Maya flinched, though she didn't show it. She felt it in her ribs. Years of hosting, of remembering birthdays, of making meals after surgeries, babysitting grandkids, quiet, constant stitches in the fabric of their lives, and now torn at the seams with a sentence. "You think this is about the chicken?" Sarah added, her voice rising. "It's about never being seen. I married into a museum." Maya stared at her, her eyes beginning to shimmer, not with tears, but with fire, and underneath it, the echo of 1,000 silent compromises. How many times had she stood in this kitchen with aching feet and a generous heart? How many times had she smiled through Sarah's dismissals, thinking it was just immaturity or stress? But now, the resentment was clear, personal, poisoned. She rose slowly, chair legs scraping the hardwood. Maya stepped around the table, past the centerpiece, past the silver wine bucket glinting like a forgotten trophy. She stopped beside Sarah, her posture still elegant, but iron-clad. Without a word, she reached for Sarah's plate, lifted it gently, decisively, as if removing a child's privilege. The china clinked as it left the linen. Maya leaned close, her voice soft enough to feel intimate and terrifying. "Let me show you," she said, "what happens when you disrespect this family's food." Maya takes action, determined to show Sarah the consequences of her behavior, but things might not go as planned. Maya walked back to the kitchen with Sarah's plate in hand, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood, echoing with an eerie rhythm. She moved with the stillness of someone who had spent decades perfecting patience, but tonight she'd found the end of it. Behind her, conversation had turned to murmurs, then to silence. She opened the warming drawer, steam curling out in ribbon. Her fingers hesitated for a moment, before selecting a smaller dish nestled near the back, an old family recipe, one Sarah had once called culinary punishment in a bowl. It was her grandmother's liver and onions, smothered in mustard gravy, a dish Sarah had mocked years ago in front of company, claiming it tasted like metal and childhood trauma. Maya placed the plate gently on a charger, and returned to the dining room. She didn't make eye contact as she set it before Sarah, but the message landed like thunder. The color in Sarah's cheeks rose. "Oh," she said flatly. "What is this? A memory test?" Maya gave a small shrug, folding her hands in her lap as she returned to her seat. "Just something old-fashioned." Daniel looked from the plate to Maya, unsure whether to intervene or evaporate. Sarah's jaw tightened. She picked up her fork like it weighed more than it should. Slowly, she took a bite. At first nothing. Her eyes flicked from Maya to the others, searching for support, a smirk, anything that would let her rise above. But the taste hit her sour, mineral, bitter with memory, and her expression cracked, her chewing slowed, her throat worked harder, her lips pressed together, trying not to betray what was happening behind them. Lena reached for her water glass and took a long sip, eyes down. Daniel shifted in his chair, elbow bumping his wine glass. Sarah finally set the fork down, almost defiantly. Her jaw tensed as she wiped her mouth with the cloth napkin like she was removing something more than flavor. Maya watched, arms folded, waiting for the remark, the next round. But it didn't come. Instead, Sarah stood up, abruptly, her chair scraped back with an angry groan. Her eyes, sharp and bright with something unspoken, locked on Maya. "I don't know what game you think you're playing," she said, her voice low but edged with heat. "But you've crossed the line this time." Maya blinked. The words didn't land the way they once would have. They floated, confusing, unearned. Then Sarah inhaled sharply, and pressed a palm to her stomach. "I'm pregnant," she said. A beat of pure silence fell, loud as thunder. "I wasn't going to say anything tonight, but since this turned into a test, since you clearly needed to win, I thought I should explain why I've been off, why the smell of chicken makes me nauseous, why your soup almost made me gag." Daniel sat upright. "Wait." Sarah ignored him, eyes locked on Maya. "You've judged me since day one. Every visit, every meal, every look, like I was never enough for this family, like I had to earn a place at your table with applause." The words fell into the center of the room like a dropped vase, shattered and sharp. "I've been trying, Maya. I've been tired, sick, afraid." Her voice cracked now, the edges no longer blade-like, but raw. "And tonight you served me humiliation and called it tradition." Maya's mouth opened, but no words came. Her mind was running, frantic, flipping through every moment, every insult, every step that had led them here. And she realized she never once asked Sarah how she was doing. Not really, not as a person, not as a daughter-in-law carrying her grandchild, just as an obstacle. Around the table, no one breathed. Maya stared at Sarah, heart pounding. Her fork sat untouched, her voice for once had nowhere to go. The evening had become something else entirely, and every eye was on her response. Sarah's attempt to salvage the situation only makes things worse, and Maya finds herself grappling with a mix of satisfaction and guilt. Sarah remained standing, one hand still pressed to her stomach, the other hanging uselessly by her side. Her face was pale, not with embarrassment anymore, but exhaustion, and unraveling. No one moved. The air in the room had thinned, stretched taut by too many withheld breaths. She drew in a shaky inhale. "I didn't want it to come out like that," she murmured. "But I don't know how else to explain this feeling, of always being just short of enough." Maya felt the heat crawl up her neck, her chest burned, but not with pride, with something darker. Regret maybe, or realization. Her voice still wouldn't come, and that silence, her own, began to feel complicit. Lena reached across the table, voice trembling but kind. "Here, sweetie," she said, passing Sarah a glass of water. "Maybe sit. Just breathe." Sarah accepted the water but didn't drink. Instead, she pushed the liver plate away, the scrape of ceramic against wood too loud, too final. Her shoulders folded inward, like the weight of the entire night had finally landed. Daniel shifted in his chair, eyes heavy with conflict. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Sarah didn't answer him. She just stared down at the linen, hands shaking faintly. Maya sat frozen, fork untouched. Her food was now cold, meaningless. She had wanted Sarah to feel something, respect, maybe fear. What she'd delivered was something else entirely, and it tasted worse than anything on that plate. She tried to speak, tried to find the right words, ones that could smooth over cracks decades deep, but all she could manage was a strained, "I didn't know." Sarah looked up briefly, her eyes glassy. "No, you never asked." There was no venom in her voice. That somehow made it worse. Rachel, seated near the end of the table, cleared her throat with the air of someone trying to reroute a storm. "Maybe we can all just take a breath, focus on the food, on being together. That's what tonight's supposed to be about, right?" It was well meant, but no one picked up their fork. Maya glanced around the room. Faces wore discomfort like evening gowns 2 sizes too small. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Lena had gone quiet, her lips pressed thin. Rachel smiled too bright, and Sarah looked like she was holding herself together with fishing line and pride. Maya's thoughts spiraled. Maybe the liver had been too much. Maybe the whole dinner had become more about the message than the meal. She had never meant to drive Sarah into humiliation, just into honesty. But now that she had it, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a fracture. The hum of the refrigerator in the nearby kitchen cut through the tension, a dull motor of domestic life continuing, oblivious. Maya looked toward the doorway leading into it, the same door Sarah had walked through so many times before, usually with a comment, a complaint, a clatter of heels. Now without a word, Sarah stood again. She didn't yell, didn't accuse. She just turned and walked into the kitchen, her hand grazing the doorframe as she passed through it like smoke. The sound of her departure was louder than anything she'd said all night. Maya remained seated, but her breath caught in her chest. She rose slowly, one hand still gripping her napkin like a lifeline, and stared at the kitchen door. For the first time tonight, she wasn't sure she'd be welcome on the other side. Maya follows Sarah into the kitchen, preparing for the confrontation that's been building all night. The moment Maya crossed the threshold into the kitchen, the warmth of the oven and simmering pots felt alien, like stepping into someone else's home. The clatter of silverware from the dining room faded behind her as the door swung gently shut. Sarah stood with her back to her, arms braced against the counter, shoulders tight like a bowstring. Maya hesitated. She could turn around, pretend this night never spiraled, let silence smooth over what words would only make worse, but she didn't. "You could have just pulled me aside," Sarah said without turning. "You didn't have to make a spectacle." Her voice cracked, not with fragility, but fury. "I wasn't trying to humiliate you," Maya replied, quieter than she expected. Sarah turned, eyes glassy, jaw set. "You served me liver like it was justice, and you did it in front of everyone." Maya folded her arms, grounding herself. "You've spent every holiday nitpicking everything I cook. You roll your eyes when I talk about traditions. You've made me feel like a ghost in my own home," Sarah scoffed. "That's not what this is about. It's never been about the food." "Then what is it?" Maya asked. "Why is everything I do wrong in your eyes?" There was a pause, thick and buzzing like the moment before a storm breaks. "Because I'll never be you," Sarah said. The admission landed like a dropped dish, unexpected, fragile, final. You walk into a room and everyone adjusts around you. You host, you lead, you feed. You make perfection look easy. And I burn toast. I forget birthdays. I can't even get through one dinner without saying something wrong. Maya stared at her, stunned. The words felt backward, distorted, like hearing your own name in a stranger's voice. "I've felt like a mistake since the day Daniel brought me home," Sarah went on. Voice thick, like I'm just one holiday away from being replaced. Maya opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her hands, which had felt so steady while slicing, plating, controlling, now trembled. The door behind them creaked open. Daniel stepped in, eyes darting from one woman to the other. "Is this really where we're going tonight?" he asked, voice taut. "Please, can we just cool off?" "Daniel," Sarah said, without looking at him. "I'm not trying to win. I'm just tired." Maya turned to him, her voice low. "Let her speak." Daniel raised his hands in retreat, backing a step toward the door. Maya returned her gaze to Sarah, who now looked like she might shatter under the weight of her own honesty. There was a small, almost imperceptible tremble in her lower lip. Not rage, not manipulation, just humor. For a moment, the kitchen was filled with nothing but the ticking of the old clock above the pantry. Maya saw a version of Sarah she hadn't allowed herself to before. Not the antagonist, not the intruder, but a woman afraid of never being truly claimed. And yet, something inside Maya still resisted. The sting of old dismissals, the exhaustion of being sidelined in her own narrative, they weren't so easy to forgive. Maybe they both had wounds too deep for a single evening to bandage. Sarah stepped back, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I'm just not meant to be part of this family." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned and walked out, not storming this time, not performing, just gone. Maya stood alone in the kitchen, the refrigerator humming behind her. Her hands still smelled like rosemary and regret, and for the first time she wondered if it was too late to fix what she'd helped break. Sarah's pride has been shattered, but can an apology be enough to repair the damage done? The dining room was still holding its breath. No one had touched their plate. The candles had burned lower, wax pooling at their bases like spilled silence. From the kitchen, the faint click of a cupboard door opening echoed, then closing again. Then came footsteps. Sarah reappeared in the doorway. Her eyes were red, mascara smudged at the corners, her posture fragile but deliberate. She paused before stepping back in, like she wasn't sure if the room would receive her or reject her. Maya watched her daughter-in-law's approach, like she might watch a wounded animal. Cautious, uncertain, not yet ready to offer her hand. Sarah's voice, when it came, was thin and uneven. "I don't know how to fix this, but I'm sorry." The words didn't hit like thunder. They landed softer, like fresh snow on already cracked ground, but they still stunned the room. Lena looked at Maya, then at Sarah, her eyes wide but kind. Rachel sat back in her chair, fingers curled under her chin, saying nothing but witnessing everything. "I've been carrying things I didn't know how to name," Sarah continued, swallowing hard. "Every little comment, every missed cue, every time I felt judged or not enough, I buried it. And tonight, it just all came out sideways." Maya didn't respond right away. She felt the whole table tilt, not physically but emotionally. Everyone waiting for her reaction like it was the real entree. Daniel sat up straighter beside her, his gaze soft and imploring. For the first time that night, he didn't look like he wanted to disappear. He looked like he hoped quietly that something could be salvaged. Maya stared at her napkin, now wrinkled from her grip. She pressed it flat, as if trying to smooth out something deeper. Her voice came low. "You know it's not easy watching someone criticize everything you once found pride in." Sarah nodded, eyes shining. "I know, I made it personal when it wasn't supposed to be. But it was personal," Maya said, lifting her eyes. "Because I took it personally. Because I made this house my whole identity after my husband died, and you came into it with a different rhythm, one I never really tried to learn." The silence shifted. Not gone, but softened. "I guess," Maya said, after a long pause, "we were both trying to prove something." Sarah gave a half laugh, half sob. And failing miserably, there was a breath of laughter at the table, tentative, but real. Lena's shoulders relaxed. Rachel reached for her glass. Daniel reached under the table and gave Maya's hand a gentle squeeze. She didn't squeeze back, but she didn't pull away either. No one tried to resume eating. No one filled the silence with platitudes. They just sat there, letting the honesty settle. Maya looked at Sarah again. Really, her daughter-in-law wasn't the woman who had once rolled her eyes at every casserole or who'd made snide jokes under her breath. Not tonight. Tonight she was someone raw, someone seeking, someone finally visible. Sarah's voice wavered. "I just want to belong here. I don't know how else to say it." The room went still. Maya felt her throat tighten. Her instincts warred, one screaming to protect herself, the other whispering to open the door, and still she couldn't speak. Not yet. Just when things seemed to calm down, an unexpected visitor knocks at the door, threatening to stir things up once again. The house had just begun to settle. The emotional aftershocks still hummed beneath the floorboards, but something resembling peace had crept back in. The room was warmer now, not in temperature, but in tone. Maya exhaled slowly, still unsure of what she'd say next, but certain it mattered. Then the doorbell rang, a clean, sharp chime that didn't belong to this fragile moment. Everyone flinched. Sarah's hands instinctively reached for her water glass. Daniel stood, hesitated, then headed for the door. Maya remained seated, stomach twisting. She didn't want anything else tonight. No more surprises, no more people, just stillness, quiet. But the door opened, and Rachel walked in. Only not the Rachel who had been sipping wine in the corner earlier. This Rachel didn't knock. She didn't wait. She stepped inside like she owned air rights to the home. "Well," she said, eyes sweeping across the table, "I see I missed Act 1 of the drama." Maya blinked, caught off guard. Rachel raised a brow. "Didn't mean to interrupt. I just needed to grab my scarf. Then I got curious. It's not every day a family meal turns into a live therapy session." Lena looked down, lips pressed tight. Sarah's shoulders drew in again. Maya rose, slowly. "Rachel, maybe this isn't..." Rachel waved a hand. "Oh, come on. Everyone's thinking it. You finally said what you've been sitting on for years. Good for you, Sarah. Sarah froze. Maya narrowed her eyes. Excuse me. Rachel walked toward the table, unapologetic, wine glass still in hand. I mean, you've always run this house like a cathedral. Sacred table, sacred menu, sacred hierarchy. It's about time someone lit a match. Daniel shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. Rachel, not now. Rachel glanced at him, then back at Maya. What? I'm not wrong. You've built this whole house around reverence, around your way. Sarah didn't stand a chance. You think she's just been difficult, but I've seen it. Every comment, every correction, every frozen smile when she messes up. Sarah looked down into her lap, her expression unreadable. Maya's voice dropped to a near whisper. What are you doing? Rachel's smile thinned. Telling the truth. Something you've never liked unless it's been pre-seasoned and served on your term. The words sliced deeper than any of Sarah's earlier jabs, because Rachel wasn't just a friend, she was history. Holidays, hospital visits. She'd held Maya's hand at her husband's funeral. Now she stood in her dining room, siding with her daughter-in-law like some prophet of long-held resentments. Maya clenched the back of her chair. And how would you know what Sarah's feeling unless... Rachel lifted her chin. Because she told me, over coffee, over you. You weren't listening to her, Maya. But I was. The room chilled. Everyone, even Daniel, seemed to shrink slightly from the fallout. Maya turned to Sarah. Is that true? Sarah didn't answer. She didn't have to. Maya's breath caught. The betrayal wasn't just about Sarah anymore. It was Rachel. The woman who used to bring over chicken soup and unsolicited advice. The one Maya had trusted, confided in. The one she thought sat beside her at this table, not across from her. Rachel smirked, as if to say, now do you see? Maya suddenly felt the weight of every dinner, every glance, every quiet nod she thought had been support, but maybe was scrutiny. She looked around and saw not just hurt, but erosion. The years of her effort were still there, but something beneath had been shifting the whole time. Maya gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. She didn't know what hurt more, that Sarah had been talking behind her back, or that Rachel had been listening. Just when it seems like everything is unraveling, Maya finds a way to break the tension and reach out to Sarah. The quiet after Rachel's words wasn't peaceful. It was volatile, coiled like a spring. Maya's fingers still curled around the back of her chair, but her grip loosened. She stared at Rachel, stunned by the betrayal. But it was Sarah, quiet, small, unmoving, who drew her gaze again. This wasn't the same woman who had mocked her soup or laughed at her roast. This woman was folded in on herself, eyes cast down, shoulders slumped like a child who had been caught, not in wrongdoing, but in sorrow. Maya took a breath, and then she did something no one expected, least of all herself. She walked around the table, steady and unhurried. Her path led not to Rachel, but to Sarah. Maya knelt down beside her daughter-in-law's chair, ignoring the flicker of surprise in Sarah's eye. I didn't see it, Maya said softly. I saw the comments, the sarcasm, but I didn't see the fear underneath. Sarah's mouth parted, but she didn't speak. I've spent so much time preserving what I thought was a legacy, Maya went on, that I forgot to make room for new voices in it, yours included. Sarah's eyes filled again, not dramatic, not performative, just full. I shouldn't have talked to Rachel like that, behind your back. That wasn't fair. It wasn't, Maya said honestly, but I gave you reasons to. At the head of the table, Daniel exhaled like he'd been underwater for hours. He moved to stand beside them, his hand resting lightly on Sarah's shoulder. Maybe now we can talk instead of just reacting. Sarah glanced up at him, then back at Maya. Her nod was small. I don't want to fight anymore. Maya smiled, faint but real. Me neither. A silence passed, this time gentler, not final, not heavy, just room to breathe. Lena dabbed her eye with a napkin. Rachel remained still, wine glass still in hand, eyes narrowed, not with cruelty, but calculation, as if watching something she wasn't quite convinced would last. Maya stood, offering Sarah her hand, not ceremonial, but simple. Sarah took it. Maya helped her to her feet. Their hug was brief, hesitant, not perfect, but it held something, not forgiveness yet, but intent, mutual recognition. I want you to be part of this family, Maya said, just loud enough for the table to hear, but not as a guest, not as someone I tolerate, as someone I learn to welcome. If you'll meet me halfway. Sarah nodded, still clutching Maya's hand. That's all I've wanted, but I know I've made it harder than it had to be. There were no applause, no grand declarations, just a soft shift in energy. Plates still untouched, but eyes finally lifting toward one another. Rachel tilted her head, swirling her wine, still watching from the corner, her expression unreadable. As Maya and Sarah shared a tentative embrace, Rachel's lips curled into something between doubt and disapproval. The peace was real but fragile, and Rachel wasn't done. The fragile truce between Sarah and Maya starts to form, but old wounds still linger. The clinking of silverware returned, cautious at first, like birds testing the wind after a storm. Dinner resumed in halting rhythms, forks lifted, bites chewed, polite murmurs filling the gaps that emotion had torn wide open. The roast had gone lukewarm, the rolls hardened slightly at the edges, but no one mentioned it. They were eating the moment more than the meal. Maya sat back in her chair, watching Sarah speak softly with Lena. It wasn't forced, at least not entirely. Sarah laughed once, even reached across the table to offer a There was a tension in her movements, a nervous energy, like someone trying out a new language they weren't sure they'd be fluent in. Still, it was something. Maya caught herself reaching for her water, only to realize her hand was trembling, not from anger, from relief. The kind that came when you put down armor you didn't realize you'd been wearing for years. Daniel met her eyes and gave a small hopeful smile. Across the table, Sarah was complimenting Lena's scarf, asking where she'd bought. Lena, ever gracious, launched into a short story about a market in Santa Fe, and Sarah listened, really listened, her head tilted in genuine curiosity. It felt foreign, but it felt better than the brittle silence that had dominated before. Still, Maya's trust didn't unfurl fully. She knew too much about the way things could turn. She knew how apologies could be weaponized, how wounds reopened not with words but with shifts in tone, a sideways glance, a withheld thank you. But tonight there was at least warmth in the room again. Maya pushed her plate forward slightly and folded her hands. She listened. She observed. When Sarah asked if anyone wanted more vegetables, Maya simply nodded. A quiet truce. Daniel leaned toward her. You okay? He whispered. Maya nodded once. Getting there. Sarah was telling Lena about the first time she burned a holiday pie. The smoke alarm went off, and I panicked so badly I tried to fan it with a magazine and dropped the whole thing into the sink. Lena chuckled. That's a rite of passage. Maya's lips curled faintly. Happened to me once with cornbread. Opened the oven too soon. Sarah looked up, caught the comment, met her gaze. Something passed between them. Not warmth, not yet, but an acknowledgement. Maya wasn't sure whether to be relieved or afraid of that shared recognition. As coffee was served and plates cleared, the tension faded more. Even Rachel grew quiet, sipping slowly, her wine glass now mostly empty. She hadn't said much since the embrace, just sat there, watching. It wasn't until the room began to soften into laughter again, genuine this time, the kind that spilled over from memory and relief, that Rachel spoke. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. I hope this peace lasts, she said, glancing over her glass. But I'm not so sure it will. The table froze for a beat. Sarah's fork paused mid-air. Daniel sat upright. Lena glanced between them all. Maya turned slowly toward Rachel, trying to read her face, but it was calm, measured, like she hadn't just dropped a stone into still water. Rachel set her glass down gently. Families are funny. Sometimes they patch things up. Other times, she trailed off with a shrug. The hum of conversation died. The warmth in Maya's chest receded like a tide. Was this Rachel's way of saying she didn't believe the change? Or worse, was she right? Maya stared into her coffee, the steam rising like a question she couldn't yet answer. Had they really begun to heal, or just postponed the next fracture? Despite the fragile peace, a final confrontation looms as Maya confronts Rachel and Sarah. The room never quite recovered from Rachel's comment. Conversation limped along, but its rhythm was broken. Forks moved in silence. Chairs shifted more than voices. Sarah picked at her food again, her laughter gone, her face carefully blank. The vulnerability from earlier had retreated, tucked away behind a wall. Maya recognized all too well. It was the face of someone preparing for another blow. Rachel, now lounging with calculated comfort in her chair, swirled the last of her wine as if she were orchestrating the atmosphere. "You know, Maya," she said casually, "you've always had a flair for taking things personally. Even your roast chicken carries expectations." Maya looked up sharply. Lena glanced sideways, clearly alarmed. Daniel sat straighter, shoulders tense. Sarah didn't speak, but her stillness said everything. "I mean," Rachel continued, smiling faintly, "every meal has a message. Every table setting a statement. It's a wonder anyone eats without reading into it." Maya felt her pulse in her temples. "Enough." Rachel arched a brow. I said enough." Maya's voice didn't rise, but it cut. The room stilled again. Sarah's fork slipped against her plate with a hollow scrape. "You've been doing this for years, Rachel," Maya said, eyes locked. "Dressing up criticism as charm. Turning conversation into commentary. Undermining me, quietly, consistently until I barely recognized who was friend and who was foe." Rachel's smile faltered for the first time all evening. "You played confidant to Sarah, all while chipping away at me. You sat at my table, drank my wine, and made sure I was always the last to hear what people thought of me." Rachel set her glass down a little too hard. Daniel glanced at Sarah, then at his mother. "Mom." But Maya didn't stop. She stood now, not trembling, not frantic, but sure. "I've lost enough already. My husband, my certainty, my peace. I won't lose my family to whispers and sideways glances." Silence. And then Sarah stood. The scrape of her chair echoed like a slap. She didn't speak, didn't look at anyone. She just began to gather her things slowly, mechanically. Maya stepped forward. "Sarah, I need to go," Sarah said, her voice quiet but final. Daniel stood too, panic flickering across his face. "Sarah, wait. I'm not doing this anymore," she said, louder now. "This tug of war between guilt and grace. This dinner table negotiation of who matters more. I thought maybe we were healing, but clearly the wounds go deeper than I thought." Her voice cracked. "I can't breathe in this house." Maya's chest hollowed. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Not this time. Sarah turned toward the coat rack, grabbing her bag with trembling fingers. Lena rose, instinctively reaching out. "Honey, please. I'll call you later," Sarah said, not unkindly, but distantly. And then she was at the door. Daniel followed, torn, eyes flicking from Maya to Sarah and back. "I'll drive her," he said. "She's not okay." The door closed behind them, and the room was still again. Maya stood frozen, her hand still half extended in apology that had come too late. Around her the table remained full, but the family felt half gone. Maya faces an emotional crossroads, unsure if reconciliation is still possible. The dining room was quieter than it had ever been. Even the clock on the wall seemed ashamed to tick too loudly. Plates sat abandoned, drinks sweating in untouched glasses. Maya hadn't moved since the door closed. Her hand still hovered in the air, now limp and pointless, before she slowly lowered it to her side. Lena stood beside her, unsure whether to reach out or step back. Rachel didn't move either. She looked satisfied in the way only someone used to stirring chaos could be. Shoulders relaxed, fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. Maya didn't acknowledge either of them. Instead, she walked into the kitchen. She didn't turn on any light, just stood at the counter, one hand resting on the cool granite, eyes locked on the window above the sink. The garden lights were on outside. The rosemary bush she'd planted 2 years ago was wild now, curling around the fence like it was trying to escape. She breathed in through her nose, slow and aching, then exhaled. The roast, the effort, the fragile peace, gone in a flash. And still she couldn't entirely blame Sarah. The hurt was fresh, but not unfamiliar. Maya had lived with this ache before when her husband died and left behind the silence of a shared life, suddenly missing one voice. But this fracture was different. This one was chosen, cut by words, widened by pride, and maybe by love too long kept hidden behind performance. She heard footsteps behind her, light, tentative. "Daniel, you okay?" he asked gently. Maya shook her head just once. Daniel came closer, but didn't touch her. "She just needs space." Maya looked at him then, "Or maybe she needed something I never gave her." Daniel frowned. "You've given her everything. Meals, support, time." "I gave her expectations," Maya said. "I gave her my standard of what love should look like. I didn't ask what she needed it to look like." Daniel was quiet, thoughtful. "She was wrong too," he said after a "But you're not the villain, Mom. You're not." Maya looked down at her hands, one of them still trembling slightly. "Then why does it feel like I lost her?" she whispered. Daniel didn't answer. He could. From the other room, the voices of Lena and Rachel murmured, low and indistinct. Maya didn't want to hear them, especially not Rachel's. Her words had stayed behind, sticky and barbed. Maya's always had a flair for taking things personally. What if Rachel was right? What if Maya had let her identity become so entangled in ritual, in routine, in roles, that there was no space left for others to breathe? She stepped away from the counter and walked into the den, quiet, dim. She sat on the edge of the couch and pulled her phone from her cardigan pocket. Her thumb hovered over the screen. The recent call log still had Sarah's name at the top. Daniel followed her in, lingering by the door, watching. Maya drew in a breath, hit call and held the phone to her ear. It rang once, twice, and then Daniel's phone buzzed. He looked down, face tightening immediately. "It's Sarah," he said, glancing at Maya. "But she's not answering your call." Maya's heart sank. He answered. "Hey, His face shifted. "Wait. What?" Maya sat up straighter. Daniel listened, his lips parting. "Are you serious? Are you okay?" Maya stood, panic rising. "Daniel, what is it?" He looked at her blindsided. "Her water just broke," he said. "Sarah's going into labor. A final unexpected revelation will change everything." Maya thought she knew about her family. Maya's breath caught. "What do you mean her water broke?" Daniel didn't respond right away. He walked to the window like he needed air, though the glass couldn't offer any. "She's not at the hospital," he said finally. "She's not even in town." Maya blinked. "What?" "She's gone," he said, turning to face her. "Left hours ago, before dinner even ended." Maya's throat tightened. "Where?" Daniel glanced down at his phone, the glow casting a pale light across his face. "She said she needed clarity, that she had to meet someone from before us." The silence hit like an avalanche, not loud, but total. Maya stared at him. "You didn't stop her?" "She didn't give me the chance," he said quietly. "She just said she was sorry, and that she'd call me when she was ready." Maya sat back down, like her body no longer trusted her legs. She felt hollowed out. "She's not just scared," Daniel added. "She's been unraveling for a while. I didn't want to see it. She's been seeing someone, a therapist I think. But she hasn't said much. And now this trip, this call, someone from her past?" Maya asked. Daniel nodded. "Someone she said she needed closure with." Maya gripped the arms of the chair, the fabric rough under her fingers. It was all slipping again. First at the table, then at the door, and now across town to a history she wasn't invited to. From the hall, Rachel's laughter echoed faintly. A cruel contrast. Maya shut her eyes. "I don't know what to do," Daniel whispered. Maya opened her mouth, closed it, then slowly stood. She walked past Daniel, past the dining room where the aftermath still lingered, and into the kitchen. She stared at the stove where the gravy had congealed in its pan. The house still smelled of time and shame. And then her phone rang. Unknown number. Her fingers hovered, but she answered. It was Sarah. "I shouldn't be calling," Sarah said, voice low, breathless, like she was standing in wind. "But I owe you something." Maya's heart pounded. "Are you okay? I'm not in labor, Sarah said quickly. That was a panic call. I had to get Daniel off the phone. Maya blinked. Why would you? I needed to speak to you alone, Sarah said. No distractions. No mediators. There was a long silence on the line. I'm pregnant, Maya, she said. But it's not Daniel's. Maya sat down hard. Her vision blurred at the edges. I thought I could carry this secret forever. I tried, but the guilt was eating me alive. And I don't want to raise a child inside a lie. Maya's mouth was dry. Who is it? You wouldn't know him, Sarah said. It was before. It wasn't planned. But it mattered. Maya closed her eyes. Does Daniel know? No, Sarah whispered. Not yet. I didn't even know myself until recently. And now I can't lie to either of you anymore. Maya didn't know what to say. The air in the room thickened until it pressed against her chest. I just wanted to tell you first, Sarah added, because despite everything you've always seen through me. The line went quiet. So what now, Maya? Sarah asked. Do I come home, or stay gone? Maya finally hears Sarah's side of the story, and it changes everything. Maya sat at the kitchen table in the hours just before noon, the teacup in her hand growing cold. Sunlight filtered through frayed lace curtains, painting soft patterns on the wood floor, a gentle reminder that life continued even when everything felt stalled. Her phone sat face up beside her, the screen dark. She didn't feel hopeful, only hollow. Then it buzzed. Sarah. Maya's thumb hesitated before swiping to answer. Good morning, Sarah said, voice fragile and measured. I'm okay. Silence stretched. Maya's heart pounded so loud she thought Sarah might hear it. She drew a breath. I left because I felt invisible, Sarah began, voice trembling, like I had to shrink to fit into everyone's expectations, especially yours. I thought caring meant clipping my wings. Maya swallowed, not the word she'd expected to hear. I felt abandoned, continued Sarah, not emotionally. You set the rules, the menu, the tone. I stayed quiet, because I was afraid you'd notice things I couldn't fix. Maya's grip tightened on the mug. She heard tremors in each syllable. I tried so hard, Sarah said, just to belong. Every criticism, every sideways glance, it felt like rejection. Her voice cracked. The way she spoke it, honest, unfiltered, shook Maya more than confrontation ever could. I've carried guilt, Sarah admitted. Guilt for words I said, for secrets I kept, for almost building a family on a lie. But know this, I've always loved Daniel. I still do. Maya blinked hard, tears forming. She inhaled, wanting to apologize but feeling words wouldn't suffice. Maya, Sarah's voice soft. I cannot be perfect, but I want to belong, on my own terms. Maya exhaled. The temperature in the room changed. She felt the knot in her chest shift, not fully loosen, but at least move. Behind her, Daniel entered the kitchen quietly. He didn't speak, just stood there, supportive, his hand resting gently on the back of Maya's chair. I'm sorry, Maya said, voice unsteady. I didn't see you, not really. I built this house on rituals and expectations. I judged when I should have. I performed when I should have listened. Tears rolled unbidden down her cheeks. She inhaled sharply, steadying herself. There was a long pause. Maya braced for silence, but instead, I forgive you, Sarah said, voice sincere. I don't demand perfection. I need honesty. That word honesty rested between them like promise. Maya's eyes filled. I promise I'll do better. We'll rebuild this if you'll let me. Daniel knelt beside her, intertwining their hands. No words, just presence. I want us to be a family, Sarah said, voice quiet but certain, with flaws. Yes, but mine, and mine alone. Maya nodded, blinking back tears. We'll start fresh, she said softly, with humility, with patience, with openness. They stayed on the line as Sarah shared how she'd be back tomorrow, carefully, slowly, rebuilding breaks with intention. Daniel stood and refilled Maya's tea without needing to be asked. He glanced at Maya, with hope she hadn't realized she'd allowed herself to feel. Maya watched the steam rise, curls of warmth after the storm. She closed her eyes, When she opened them, she felt something like release, but tighter, like hope with an anchor. "Tomorrow," Sarah said, "I'll come home." Maya lifted the mug to her lips and sipped. It was still warm. "Welcome home," she thought, without saying it out loud. Maya gently placed the phone down. The room fell silent, but it no longer felt empty. The question hung in the air. Could they really heal what had been broken? The family comes together, stronger and more united, with a new understanding and the promise of healing. The morning Sarah returned. The sky was soft with overcast light, the kind that makes colors gentler, shadows kinder. Maya stood at the front window, fingers curled around her teacup, watching the curve of the street like it might give her a sign. When the black sedan pulled up and Sarah stepped out, hair pulled back, coat wrapped tight around her, Maya didn't rush to the door. She didn't throw it open or perform. She simply waited, heart pounding like she was meeting someone for the first time. Sarah paused at the walkway, their eyes meeting through glass, 1,000 things unspoken. And then Maya opened the door. No words, just a quiet, careful embrace. It wasn't cinematic. There were no sweeping strings. Just two women wrapped in the residue of everything they'd said, and everything they hadn't. Forgiveness hung between them, not fully spoken, not fully earned, but present. By noon the kitchen was full again, not of tension but of smells. Garlic, lemon, broth simmering on the stove. Maya had rolled up her sleeves and beside her, Sarah was slicing carrots, sleeves pushed back, hair tied messily like she used to when they first met. They didn't talk about the past. Not yet, but they moved in a rhythm neither had known they shared, passing utensils, nodding without words, tasting and adjusting like they were discovering each other in the process of making soup. Daniel entered, face brightening at the sight. "Should I be worried?" he joked gently. Two strong women with sharp knives. Maya smiled, really smiled, and handed him a spoon. "You can be our taste tester." He beamed, stepping between them. And for a flicker of a moment, everything felt right, familiar. Later as the family gathered around the table once more, smaller than before, quieter, but more honest, Rachel hovered at the edge. She didn't sit. She simply approached Maya with hands folded and a face that for once didn't wear irony. "I overstepped," she said softly. "I thought I was helping. I see now I wasn't." Maya, startled by the humility, gave a simple nod. "Thank you for saying that." Rachel turned, giving them space. Maya didn't ask her to stay. The meal was modest. No centerpiece. No showmanship. Just warm bowls, buttered bread and stories told between bites. Lena raised her glass. "To second chances," she said, "and to soup made with fewer grudges." Laughter rippled, light, unguarded. When the dishes were cleared, Maya and Sarah sat on the porch, 2 mugs of tea between them, legs wrapped in blankets. The sun had dipped, gold along the edge of the clouds. "I was afraid I'd broken everything," Sarah said, voice quiet. "You didn't," Maya replied. "We both cracked it. We both have to fix it." Sarah looked at her, eyes tired but soft. "I'm willing." "So am I." A breeze picked up, rustling the rosemary just below the porch. Maya reached for her mug. "You know," she said, voice thoughtful, "I used to think perfection was the glue, that as long as things looked right, they were right." Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Turns out glue's overrated." Maya laughed, a warm, round sound that surprised even her. They sat there long after the tea cooled, watching the porch light blink on. Inside, the kitchen still held the smell of broth and healing. Outside on that quiet porch, 2 women who had nearly torn each other apart now sat shoulder to shoulder, weathered, flawed, and finally a family.